Hello and welcome to Press TV's debate. I'm Marzia Hashimi. Thanks so much for being with us. Well, in May of this year, the brutal killing of an African-American man, George Floyd, by police led to an outcry by Americans, black and white, against police brutality. Now, almost 3 months have passed and demonstrations are continuing in some cities. But as a new video has surfaced of another black man being killed, this time being shot 11 times, many ask, what has really changed? And if nothing has, for how long should black Americans wait for equality? I'm going to cross over to Washington, D.C., joined by Press TV's Colin Campbell. Colin, thanks so much for being with us. Well, Colin, can you talk about this latest case that took place in Lafayette, Louisiana?
Yeah, this was a case where some are reporting that this man was actually tasered first and then shot 11 times as he walked away from police. And what's interesting here is that he didn't seem to charge at police before he was shot. He was actually walking towards the convenience store. Now, there are other reports that the man was carrying a knife and that he was walking towards the convenience store and that police shot him out of what they would refer to as an abundance of caution because he was wielding a knife, according to reports. Now, if he had a knife, and it was proven that he had a knife, it would be a very hard case for those who actually disagree with the shooting to have a case, because it would be said that the man with the knife could have posed a threat to the people in the convenience store. And so police had to take a very decisive, quick action to kill the man. Now, again, what we do hear about most often in the narrative of the U.S. and when it conflates with racism and policing is that it's an unarmed black man who is usually shot and killed. And with this situation, there's a little bit of ambiguity here as more reports are coming out whether or not this man was actually unarmed or not. If he did have a knife, even if he didn't have a gun, he would still be described as armed, and it would still give police, according to the law, especially because of immunity, of what's called immunity, where they can shoot someone without being questioned because they're saying they are doing it in the interests of safety. And so that's what's going to be argued about here. But of course, even to elaborate more on your earlier question, what has changed? Well, so far, really nothing. Even if this one case excused the police for the shooting, there's still plenty of other cases that, that wouldn't show that there was reasonable action, especially when it comes to deadly force.
All right. Well, thanks so much for that update, Colin. I'm going to turn to Chicago. I'd like to welcome Dr. Gale Frazier, educator and activist, to the program. Thanks so much for being with us. You heard our correspondent there in Washington talking about the situation that took place. A 31-year-old Trayvon Pellerin, who was killed in Lafayette, Louisiana, and was shot 11 times for allegedly carrying a knife. And I did see the video, and from what I saw, it appeared that he had a knife. But my question, Dr. Frazier, would be, even if he had been carrying a knife and he's walking away from police, though going towards the store, couldn't they have tasered him? Couldn't they have shot him in the hand? Couldn't they have shot him in the foot? We're talking about 11 shots, 11 bullets. Why is that the case? And we see this time and time again.
Well, that's an excellent question that you asked, and our issue has and continues to be the same. The bottom line is that whether or not he had a knife in his hand, while that is important, we have to look at the root cause for many of these things that occur. A lot of our people are traumatized by the police, by society in general, because of the systemic and ongoing racism that we have as a people had to experience even to this day. And so our people, many of them having mental illnesses that have not been addressed, mental illnesses that have not been looked into in terms of health, all of those different things that, of course, other individuals received. In particular, would this situation have been the same had it been a Caucasian going into the store? Because again, the narrative as it pertains to our black men is quite different from the narrative that whites get when it's a situation that's similar. Case in point, the situation, and I don't want to move away from it, but the situation with this Dylan Roof, who went into the black church and killed up 9 individuals. The police, when they took him out, they took him to Burger King and all this, and they made sure that he was very well taken care of. So the issues that we have here go far deeper than a person having a knife. We're concerned about the safety of individuals. However, the narrative that anytime these officers come in contact with black men, that it always has to result in death, then that's a very serious problem. And regarding the changes, no, there has not been a change, even at the death, the murder of George Floyd. And because I have to add that black people are still considered only 3/5 of a human being, even though they say that that's not the case, but that's written in their constitutional documents that says that if you're a property, you don't have a life that's valued. So we have to look at the whole context of this. People are rebelling because they're saying that we need, as a people, we need the supports. We don't need to continue to fund these deadly acts that are done against us as a people, but we need to start funding those programs that's going to make a difference in the lives of many of our mentally challenged young men and women who have to deal with this every day. So that's my position on this whole thing.
Well, I want to stay with you, Dr. Frazier. I know that you're an educator, and I want to talk about certain aspects of life for Black Americans in the United States, perhaps for others who do not live there. It is difficult to understand when we're talking about systemic racism and the many facets of life and how it's affected, whether we're talking about from the educational system, whether we're talking about healthcare, whether we're talking about safety and peace of mind, employment. I'd like for you to touch on that briefly.
Yes, well, briefly, I'll say educationally, the school system has been structured to devalue black students, and in terms of having their history taught, that's purposely done, that they don't know their true history. As a result of that, our children have been totally demoralized, and it's a whole story that goes along with that. Regarding health, the same thing. We as a people do not receive all of the different benefits, health issues. In fact, individuals are afraid to go to the hospital because they don't want to end up dead. So we have situations here that's quite traumatic that the majority culture does not understand. And when you try to address this because of their fragility, it's difficult for us to engage in a civilized conversation to address these disparities.
Okay, stay with me, please. I'd like to get Dr. Vernellia Randall, emeritus professor of law, University of Dayton in Orlando, in on this conversation. Thanks so much for being with us. And I know, Dr. Randall, that you have dealt with the legal aspects and connecting to the medical, and overall, you have looked at stress, what stress has done to Black Americans. I'd like to touch on that aspect of it because we're looking overall at the effects of systemic racism for hundreds of years and its continued effect today.
Well, thank you, and thank you for inviting me. One of the things that we know is that that is sort of recently confirmed through science is that chronic stress changes how beings operate, and that it takes 60 years of not having stress for the genes to go back to operating normally. And so for Black Americans, you're saying that from the moment they stole our ancestors, kidnapped them off the coast, off of Africa, kidnapped them, from that moment they were in stress. Whether or not half of them died in the process from the stress and the journey. And the other half that arrived here in the South America, North America, were sick. And we've never been fully well since then because of the impact of that stress and because of ongoing racism. And this is science that they're applying to other groups. Like they have studied the impact of stress on the descendants of Holocaust survivors, the impact of stress on the descendants of Vietnam era veterans. They have not undergone the study of stress on descendants of Africans enslaved in the United States. But we know from all the research that that stress is at the root of all our health problems.
Well, Dr. Randall, staying with you in Orlando, there would be many that say, you talk about the past and what Black Americans have gone through. And there would be many that say, okay, get over it. There was slavery. There was Jim Crow. There's been discrimination. But now it's a very different situation, and the opportunity is across the board. I mean, what would you say to that?
Well, I mean, when people respond that way, then they haven't listened carefully. And this is what I'm talking about is not just applied to Black Americans. It is applied to any group who goes through chronic stress. But Black Americans have had an ongoing chronic stress of racism that has affected us. And the research, if you're willing to look at science, and if you're unwilling to look at science, I can't say anything to you because you are denying the science. The science says historical stress, that the health of the mother affects the health of the child. That's the way healthcare providers put it. Well, once you say that, the health of the grandmother affects the health of the child. The health of the great-grandmother affects the health of the child. And since nothing has ever been done to fix that problem, that harm, of course there is ongoing impact of slavery, segregation, and racism. I don't know what else to say to people, and if people don't want to hear that, they can deny it, but that doesn't make it not true.
Okay, well, Gale, demonstrations have been taking place for a while now, but we still haven't seen anyone charged for the murder of Breonna Taylor, who, of course, was killed while sleeping in bed by police. Now, protesters continue to demand that police be charged in this case, but 5 months later, so far, no one has been. And, of course, this is not the only case. We see this constantly. What would appear to many to be obvious situations of murder, and yet we see time and time again that either they're not charged, or at the end of the day, because of pressure, even if they're charged, very few will actually serve time for it. Your analysis of this, what exactly does it mean?
Well, again, it goes back to what I said previously, is that if you're only 3/5 of a human being, then that means that your humanity means nothing. You know, I have to say, and a lot of the individuals who are in these esteemed positions, sports, individuals who are in sports, and ones who have these great names, Black basketball players, so forth, they have all been the recipients of biases on various levels. So, you know, again, I'm going to always refer back to that. I'm not under the notion that there is equality and equal justice for all here, because that's a lie. It's never been equal justice for all here. We have always been, for the most part, the bottom end of everything. They'll look at everybody else's things, agendas, before they consider Black folk. And again, you have to keep in mind, if a person is only 3/5 of a human being, then that means you're not a human being. So that can legitimize and justify all of the misdeeds and all of the things that have been perpetrated against us as a people. That legitimizes, it can ease the consciences of those who are the perpetrators. So that in particular, especially with the police department and those who are supposed to uphold the law, remember the history of them is that they had been the patty catchers or the slave catchers. So their origin goes back deep into slavery. So you can't expect, for the most part, a system that has already been set up to dehumanize, to kill, and that's their MO. And so, you know, for the few, the ones that are trying to do what's righteous, the system itself is greatly marred and needs to be upheaved and refigured. But unfortunately, that's not the sentiment of the majority. So here we go again with this situation.
Okay, well, Vernellia, we saw in the 60s, after the civil rights movement, some improvement in certain aspects of life for some African Americans, but now almost 5 decades later, why do we see still such a discrepancy in the quality of life for the average Black American when compared to the average white American, and we're talking about across the board?
Well, the racial backlash that was brought in with Reagan. So I'm a beneficiary of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. I was a teenager when it was passed, and everything that happened to me within my career and everything was a direct result of that. So that from 64 through the 70s, there was a real attempt to try to, and I say attempt, I'm not saying it was a great attempt, but it was real. That attempt was so real that there was a white backlash that brought in Reagan. And that brought in neo-Jim Crow, neo-legal apartheid, neo-slavery, and it's been getting worse every year since Reagan.
So you're saying from the time of Reagan until now, are we seeing, totally opposite. You said 1964 and then the 60s in general, you were a beneficiary to certain aspects of the civil rights movement. But so we're talking about from the 80s until today, has the situation regressed?
Seriously regressed. Much worse than people think that the biggest problem is explicit laws, but implicit laws can be the biggest problem. So you have Reagan come in, you have the white backlash against what they perceived was unjust in the 64, in the late 60s and the 70s. So then you have the 80s come in with the backlash, and every administration, including Clinton and Obama, has done something that is, in terms of passing laws that are neutral on their face, but have a significantly racial disparate impact.
Well, let me just stop you there. Let me just stop you there. So you're saying that every administration since Reagan, including, as you said, Clinton, Obama, all of them basically have continued this trend, regressing as far as the rights of Black Americans. So this is 2020 election year election coming up in a couple of months, and we have, of course, Donald Trump, and then we have Biden, and we have the whole play on words from both sides. At the end of the day, for Black America, does it make a difference if Donald Trump is in the White House or if Biden is in the White House?
It depends on whether you like your pain overt or hidden. Black people are going to be in pain. We're going to be in pain no matter what. What we have, and maybe to some extent, we look at Trump, and Trump is an obnoxious sociopath who does things against not just against the world, okay? And then you have Biden, who is a neoliberal in the vein of Reagan. Mm-hmm. And so Biden's not going to be helpful to us. In fact, Biden is going to he's going to call it police reform, but it's going to be nowhere near reform. It's going to give police more money. It's not going to take money away from them. It's not going to put new restrictions on them, but he'll do some community stuff.
Okay, stay with me, because I'm running.
It depends on how we want our pain.
Okay, depends on how we want our pain. Wow. Gale, your take. So not the Democrats, not the Republicans have been able to provide very much for Black America. What is the key then, Gale? We see these demonstrations continuing. We also see Black people continuing to be killed and continuing to be incarcerated. So what's the answer? What needs to be done?
That's a powerful question. I don't think I'm the one to be able to say it over the air, because I do have my own personal views. However, to be politically correct, and I'm often not, they want everybody, of course, to just get along and continue the marches and all these kinds of things. But I want to point out one thing. Biden has already said that his primary agenda is going to be the LGBTQ. So I think in that particular regard, we should have a very clear understanding where this whole thing is going. And so I think right there, what I said was enough. That's what his agenda is. Do not have faith in either one. The bottom line is I am a praying woman, so I do believe in prayer, and that I do. But the thing is, in terms of us having any serious impact, it's a serious problem here because we have been talking about reparations. We can't get that because we're not a sovereign nation. We've been talking about self-determination, and all of these things have been going on for years. And as it was said previously, it's not gotten better, but rather has grown worse. So we have a lot of different things that we have to look at. People are going to have to make their own individual choices as far as what they think is best at this point. But again, I said I have my own personal views, but I will not say that over the air.
And I respect you for that. And on that note, I appreciate both of you for being with us. And of course, this is a conversation that we will be continuing having. I thank both Dr. Gale Frazier, educator and activist out of Chicago, and Dr. Vernellia Randall, emeritus professor of law and University of Dayton out of Orlando. And as always, viewers, we appreciate you being with us on another debate. I'm Marcia Hashimi signing out for myself and all the crew right here in Tehran. Hope to see you right here, same time, same place, next time.